All right, all right. Welcome everybody to another episode of Hot Seat Automotive Podcast. Your buddy CJ here. And tonight, a very special episode. We're talking about all things automotive industry, car guy stuff, all the things that automotive enthusiasts are most interested in. This is the place for real gearhead talk. We say it all the time, real gearhead talk right here. I'm so grateful that you guys are all here. Guys, if you haven't done so already, please give me a like and subscribe. Love all my subscribers, love all my guests. But if you're into cars, if you're into the automotive industry, if you're a car guy, if you're a car girl, if you love talking about all things gearhead hobby, automotive enthusiast hobby, you have come to the right place. Please join me. I'd love to have you on board. Guys, we just have so much fun, and we do what automotive enthusiasts do, which is we talk about cars, all aspects of cars. And tonight, we have a very special episode. We're talking about 60 years of the Ford Mustang, a story 60 years in the making, and what an incredible journey it's been. You know, the Ford Mustang is the backbone of the automotive enthusiast hobby in the United States of America. Real talk. Your buddy CJ said it tonight. And if it offends anybody and bothers anybody, you know me. I got to tell it like it is. But in all seriousness, guys, the Ford Mustang for decades has been a big part of the backbone of the automotive enthusiast hobby for a huge cross-section of enthusiasts, particularly in the United States. Okay? And let's be real. The Ford Mustang is also a survivor. It has been continuously in production since 1964. You do the math. Ford Mustang been in production for 60 years. What an incredible story of resilience, of evolution, and just the significance of this storied platform, this incredible brand, because it is indeed a brand. It's a brand with sub-brands. It's a part of American history. It's a part of Americana in this country. The Ford Mustang, so important. It's so important that your buddy CJ is so excited to share an episode with you tonight where we're going to get into this and really talk about it. So let's go ahead and do just that. Guys, as you know, here on Hot Seat Automotive Podcast, we look at things together. And we're going to look at together right now the debut of the 1964 Ford Mustang at the 1964 World's Fair. Guys, what we're looking at here is the debut of the 1965 Ford Mustang. This was it. This was the official press release at the 1964 World's Fair. But before this, let's go back in time a bit. Join me on this journey, people. We're going to go back in time. I really want to set the stage for the introduction of the Ford Mustang. What led up to this car being introduced? And I think we got to go back to World War II. How do you like that? Join me. 1940s America. You know, soldiers coming home to an America, and really getting on with their lives, so to speak, after the World War II. The war wrapped up in 1945, as you guys know. Many of those soldiers, returning to normal society, if you will, they sought out things like the motorcycle enthusiast hobby. They sought out to find themselves wives, spouses, and they got into the business of careers and starting families. So the silent generation, being that World War II generation, gave birth to the boomer generation, the baby boomers. So important to the history of the Ford Mustang. You cannot talk about the Ford Mustang without talking about how it relates to the baby boomer generation. So as these children of the World War II generation kind of came of age, when you think about it, take 1945, add like 16 years, okay? So add 18 years, add 20 years. We're talking about late 50s, early 60s America. As these young boomers came of age, many of them got into the automotive enthusiast hobby, if you will. They were interested in cars. Some of them didn't want that old iron 1940s, 1950s stuff. They wanted something for their generation. And what market research said with leaders like Lee Iacocca, guys, how important was Lee Iacocca to the history of the Ford Mustang? So important. Oftentimes, and please leave me comments if you feel differently. When I think of Lee Iacocca, my first thought is Chrysler Corporation. This is a man who's had such a storied career, but Lee Iacocca played a major role in the development of the Ford Mustang. And he was at Ford at the time. And looking at market research, really the voice of the consumer and what Iacocca and others saw was that the desire was for a sporty, fun car, something small and light with that sporty image, uh, you know, that kind of gave birth to the concept of the pony car. Okay. Hence, the Mustang was born. And when we think about the pony car concept, what we're talking about is that long hood and that short deck. Okay. Uh, Iacocca and team, they came up with the Ford Mustang design. The whole development and design program was somewhere on the order of 18 months. So it was very, very fast. It was accelerated. And as I mentioned, they debuted this car at the 1964 World's Fair, and it was a big hit. It was an instant smash. So let's take a look at something else here. Maybe a better quality image of what we're talking about here. So 1964 was the debut, the first generation Ford Mustang, while it debuted in 1964 at the World's Fair. And while production ramped up 60 years ago in 1964, these were 1965 model years. You'll often hear them referred to by Mustang enthusiasts as 1964 and a half. Okay. But really the genesis here was, manufacturing ramped up in 1964. These things came out. Ford's expectations, Iacocca and Ford, knowing that there was a demand for this pony car, for this sporty, fun, small, lightweight car with an image, they thought maybe we'll sell 100,000 cars, right? And we'll call it success. This thing was a smash hit. This thing was a fashion statement. This thing was an answer to what the early 1960s car guy was looking for. This thing caught fire. I think the silent generation guys probably, the previous generation guys probably were into these cars as well, no doubt. But the boomers loved these cars. This was a sports car, a sporty car. I shouldn't even say sports car. This pony car, this Mustang, really captured the attention and the imagination of those young boomers as they came of age. So important. In the first year, they sold about 600,000 of these. And after a couple years, they sold 1 million. Victory for Ford. Ford had a winner on its hands, folks. This Mustang, a couple things to know. These cars were going, in some cases, for over MSRP. Here we are in 2024, 60 years later, and we've got instances of whether it's an in-demand fill-in-the-blank car, an exotic car, a muscle car, performance car comes out, whatever it might be, we kind of gripe about, well, now they're charging over MSRP. Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. Some of these first generation Mustangs, when they came out, were going for over MSRP. Of course, the numbers were a bit different back then, weren't they? We won't get into an economic discussion, but this thing was a big hit. A couple of other things that I think are really interesting. We talked about the concept of the Mustang being a survivor, so always in production since 1964, which I think is just an incredible story. What other products do you know like this? At this level where the brand and the product has survived and evolved and maintains relevance and prevalence with multiple generations for 60 years. Yeah, there's a few examples, but there's also a lot more examples of things that just vaporized, okay? The Mustang has been continuously in production since 1964. Something else that I think is interesting about this, that from the beginning, the base model Mustang, they always offered an economy option. And then they always kind of stepped that up and also offered sort of a top of the line high performance variant. They always offered sort of the hardtop as well as the convertible, going back to this generation. Okay, that was a thing. And listen, this car became so Hollywood. This car became sort of a darling in the media. This car became big with celebrities. And we'll take a look at that right now together. As you know, we like to do on Hot Seat Automotive Media, we look at these things together. Here's a great example of Hollywood playing a part in the history of a car. The Ford Mustang used in Bullitt, Steve McQueen, with those chase scenes. Okay, how iconic. All right, against the Mopar enemy car. But this, a film known mostly for its chase scenes and for the cars. Okay, you know, again, this is just an example of maybe it's life imitating art or art imitating life. The Mustang was a hit, and it was a hit in Hollywood, as I mentioned, as used in the film Bullitt. And then all those years later, we're going to talk about how the Bullitt came back as special edition offerings with later generations of Mustangs with some of these styling cues. Really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. Guys, so a couple things happen, though, if we think about the dynamics of sort of the end of that first generation. That first generation ran from 1964 and a half when production started through 1973. But if you think about what was going on in early 70s America, 1973, let's talk about the Mustang. They started to see sales kind of tapering off. 1973, you had the oil crisis. You also had the trend towards compact cars, okay, imported cars. The population, consumers became more and more conscious of mileage, miles per gallon, issues with the supply chain and the cost of oil and fuel. Also, other entrants into the market, certainly, the imports, etc. Compact cars became sort of all the rage. Now, the Mustang had gained weight. The Mustang had gained size in that first generation towards the tail end with some of those, like the Mach 1, etc. The car was getting inflated. The car was puffing up. By that time, they had sort of a big block variant. They had some special editions. You think about the Mustang. I think it's worthwhile to say how many great special editions has Ford given us over the years with the Mustang. We've had GTs, we've had Mach 1s, we've had Boss 302, 429, we've had the Cobra, we've had the Bullitt, the 5.0 brand itself, we'll talk about in a few minutes, the GT 500, the Shelby, the Terminator, the Shelby Cobra. Over the years, there have been so many cool performance variants. And these brands that have lasted, these I call them sub-brands and variants that have lasted through the decades and that have really captured the imagination of automotive enthusiasts over time. And some of them have gone away and then they've come back. And I think it's just an incredible story of resilience, but then also the power and the loyalty in the Ford Mustang community around these brands, around these trim packages. And around the heritage. That's a big story. Technologies have changed, platforms have changed, performance figures. I talked about the end of the first generation where global macroeconomic considerations were changing, consumer tastes were changing a bit. But Mustang has evolved with consumer taste, which is kind of interesting, right? I think it's a fantastic and amazing story around innovation and evolution. Full credit to Ford and its leadership team. Now, not all of these are viewed favorably. Let's be blunt. Real talk tonight. We got to get to some real talk, guys. Let's talk about this thing, and let's talk about it together. Oh, dear. Guys, we got to talk about this thing. The Ford Mustang II. Second generation Mustang. We're talking about 1974 through 1978. Guys, history has not been kind to this car, has it? This was the Mustang, in the early 70s as this thing, made its way to the market. This was going to be for the mass market. This was going to be a Mustang to turn on those that may be interested in compact cars. This is going to be the Mustang to help navigate the oil crisis and the increasing costs of fuel and some of the, again, I mentioned the macro changes in taste and in economic components. Yeah, history has not been kind to this car, the Ford Mustang 2. This thing, I think Ford lost its way a bit with this car. They still sold a lot of them. And I think people forget that. They sold a lot of these cars. You know, you look at this, you look at the Pinto, sometimes, you want to cringe a bit. But I do think, I mean, it's a part of automotive history, right? It's a part of Mustang history. I think the Mustang, in hindsight, lost its edge. I think when I see these, especially like in this type of trim package, it's kind of a chick car, and if that offends anybody, whatever, it is what it is. It's not really an edgy, cool, performance looking machine. Now, we're going to look at some of the trim packages where I think Ford tried, but performance numbers were off at this point with some of those challenges around maintaining certain economies, the emergence of emissions requirements. It became difficult to get high performance and acceptable economies out of these cars. Okay. So they were kind of at odds. And what won out was the economic aspect. And I think it's, the Mustang 2 gets an unfair amount of shade, I think, because we compare it with modern era Mustangs and some of the stuff that came before it and some of the stuff that came after it. It's not fair. This Mustang 2 probably was a victim of what was going on in the automotive industry and what was going on, certainly in the United States economically and more broadly across the globe. Hence, Mustang 2 was born. And it's not, and I would tend to say this is not a beloved car. So let's take a look at this thing, because here's another one, right? Can we please show a little love for the Ford Mustang 2 Cobra and King Cobra? This car gets an unfair amount of shade. Now, guys, tell me what you think in the comments. I know it was not a performance, monster. These cars were subject to technology limitations, economic challenges, limitations around EPA requirements, economy requirements, a changing appetite, a changing customer desire for performance cars. 100 different reasons why this car was the way it was. And I think it gets an unfair amount of hatred and scrutiny under the lens of better Mustangs that came before it or maybe came after it. But for its era, this was it, right? And Ford tried, right? They offered a performance variant in the Cobra and the King Cobra. Don't even bother looking at the performance numbers, right? I mean, it's almost archaic to look at it. Before the time, it's kind of, right in line with what was going on in the industry. So it's, again, completely unfair to compare this to like a super cool GT350 from the 60s or, a modern GT500 or Mach 1, whatever. It's just not that. But it is representative of what was going on in the automotive industry, the dawn of the compact car era, changing consumer appetite, demand and expectations around mile per gallon, EPA, smog, pollution. All of these things stacked up to give us the Mustang 2. And they sold a lot of these, but history has not been kind to them, unfortunately. All right, guys, let's get excited. The Fox Body Mustang. Are you kidding me? The Fox Body Mustang coming out in 1979. This car is so important to the history of the Ford Mustang. They sold well over 2 million of these. This car really was the Mustang for a whole new generation. We talked a lot about the boomers, okay, with the first gen Mustang. This car was really the apple of the eye of so many Generation X automotive enthusiasts. It was back then. It had a huge cultural significance in the automotive industry back then, in the automotive enthusiast hobby, particularly for Gen Xers. Your buddy CJ is a Gen Xer, and when I was growing up, these Mustang GTs, the 5.0 liter, that was a big portion of, the car you wanted when you were in high school, the car you aspired to. It was Mustang versus Camaro. It was Mustang versus Corvette. Okay, you definitely had, your Supras, your Celicas, some guys were into Volkswagen, etc. But for the most part, this Mustang was one of those cars really carrying the flag for American performance in that era. This car had a run from 1979 to 1993. I think the sweet spot was probably late 80s into the end of the run. These cars really looked cool. This one in particular, take a look at it. It's so rad era, retro cool. It's so iconic. That cladding, those headlights, the wheels, the whole thing. It had that 5-liter, that 302, rock solid engines. They responded well to bolt-ons. Guys would go to performance centers of America, or put on the headers, do the cams, the intakes, fuel systems, whatever it might be, the exhaust. You'd work on the suspension, maybe do aftermarket rims. The automotive enthusiast hobby was alive and living well for a whole new generation of automotive enthusiasts, with some modern stuff coming out from Ford with these Mustangs. We're not going to get into too heavily the Camaros of this era, or some of the Toyotas, what Honda was doing, etc. We're here to talk about the Mustang. And what I want to tell you is, this thing ran from 79 to 93. The Fox body is still super important to our hobby. We just got done talking about that Mustang 2, which history has not been kind to the Mustang 2. Real talk tonight. The Fox body Mustang, is just so well loved by Mustang enthusiasts, by car enthusiasts in general. They made a ton of these. You can snag them. Listen, they absolutely, some of them are collectible, especially unmolested examples, but you can get them. You can still find them out there. Have a heck of a great time with them. They're just absolutely incredible cars. And this was an important car. It was a cultural icon back then. It became a part of pop culture, and it still is to this day. Let's take a look at, it wasn't just about the 5-liter, the 5.0s and the GTs. What I will tell you is Mustang also in this era. Let's take a look at this together, guys. Ford and the Mustang brand, they've always been innovators. Take a look at this. This comes out of that third gen era of the Mustang, that Fox body era. This was the SVO, the Ford Mustang SVO. For those that don't know about it, 4-cylinder turbo. This car didn't have a big old high displacement V8. This was a 4-cylinder turbo from the factory. Okay, this car was more focused on technology and innovation. Suspension. Look at that hood scoop. So cool. The styling of this car was unique. The wheels were unique. Really easy to spot one of these if you know what it is. But Ford ahead of its time. Now in the era of the EcoBoosts, the past couple generations of Mustangs, where we're getting 300 horsepower plus out of those things. Okay. Back then, I think if you were an automotive enthusiast in the 80s, you were probably a bit lukewarm to the idea of a turbo 4-cylinder in your Mustang. But history has been kind to the SVO. These are collectible now, and I do think Ford was ahead of its time in considering that. And so many manufacturers have gone directionally, and some exclusively, to these high performance 4-cylinder turbo engines. Really cool stuff. And Ford was doing it in the 80s, so you got to give them credit for that. All right, guys, let's take a look at the 4th generation Mustang together, shall we? What are we talking about here, guys? New Edge Mustang. Let's take a look at the 4th generation New Edge Mustang together. The 4th generation Mustang ran 1994 to 2004. This had some fairly radical styling updates, and I think those that really love that 1980s era, that third gen, that Fox body Mustang, particularly the Gen Xers, they were kind of lukewarm to this car. This car took a while to catch on. I think, excuse me, one was sort of the the aesthetics of this car, the appearance. You got away from that boxy sort of nice chunky look on the Fox bodies when at the end of their run. You got into this new edge styling, kind of curvy, kind of evolved, if you will. It took a while. Towards the end of the run, I think they got into the sweet spot of these cars. I think they looked fantastic. When they first came out, I think one of the interesting things, the 94s and 95s, I believe, still had that 5-liter 302 from the previous generation Mustang. It was a carryover for the most part, in my understanding. Leave me comments if you had one of those. But then 1996 saw the debut of the modular engine, that 4.6 liter. And again, I do think, there was some skepticism towards the new platform. Performance, wasn't a huge performance jump or anything from the previous generation in some ways. And that whole concept that, wait, we have a smaller displacement engine. I think that, that did have some negative backlash. And these were kind of in my view, as an automotive enthusiast, when these came out, I think it took a while as the trim packages, as the aesthetics got cooler, as the performance got better on these. They ultimately came out with, for example, the Mach 1. And that's what we're looking at here. The 4th generation Ford Mustang Mach 1. Are you kidding me? With that functional shaker scoop on the hood? Come on. How cool was that? The repop of those retro wheels. I love this car. This is one of my favorites of the modern era, was this 4th generation Mach 1. And it came towards the end of the run, and wow, these cars are just so cool. As I mentioned, 4th generation took a while. It took a while. Wasn't the instant hit that like the original 1st gen Mustangs were. These took a while, in my view. Tell me what you think in the comments. But I think these took a while. And then, culminating in, those SVT cars, the Cobras that they came out with, the Cobra R. You had the Terminator at the end of the run, that supercharged, incredible, high-performing Mustang. They are so desirable today. But, that 1999 Ford, I claim the best of this run, in my view. Real talk tonight. Tell me what you think in the comments. Your buddy CJ says the 4th generation Mustang started kind of slow, and history, I don't think, has been kind to the first few years. 1999 to 1994, those are the Mustangs that you want. Those are the versions of the 4th gen Mustang that you want, in my view. Tell me what you think. But in some of these special edition cars, certainly the GTs are fantastic. They made a Bullet. Okay, you could get a GT with the Bullet wheels, later on in the run, that looked just fantastic. I had one of those cars. I loved that car with the manual transmission. The manual transmissions were not great. It was the better option. This 4th generation Mustang and the 3rd generation, you did not want the automatic. The automatic was like a kiss of death. Let's be blunt. Real talk tonight. 3rd generation Mustang Fox body, 4th generation Mustang, those automatics were god awful. I mean, they were functional. That's about all I'll say. They were functional. They were okay. But if you were an automotive enthusiast, if you wanted that true performance experience, you wanted the manual. And these manuals were not great of this era when you compare them, in my view, to the modern ones. There were some special editions where they got the transmission tuning and the linkage and the gear ratios right. But for the most part, like the GT I had, I wasn't thrilled with the manual. It was what it was. And especially, when you compare it with something a bit more modern, it's probably even an unfair comparison, but they're definitely better than the automatics. I do think that, these 4th generations, the modular engines, they took a while to really catch on. But this is also a great way, in my view, to get into our hobby. If you look at these 4th gen Mustangs, that's kind of a sweet spot around value and price right now. So if you said, listen, I don't have a huge budget, but I am an automotive enthusiast and I want to get something I can have fun with. And I'm a big fan of the Mustangs and I want to be able to go to the Cars and Coffee and the car meets. Consider getting a 4th generation Mustang, a new edge Mustang. There's some great ones out there, and you can have a heck of a lot of fun with it. But these were important cars. Guys, what are we looking at here? We are looking at the 5th generation, what's known as an S197 Mustang, 2005 through 2014. I think the coolest thing about these, in my mind, is that Ford went sort of all in on the retro styling with these. More pronounced. I think towards the end of the run of the fourth generation, you started seeing some influence of that retro styling, particularly when they came out with the bullet and those bullet wheels. By the time they got to the fifth generation, it was more pronounced. If you look at the GTs with those fog lights, if you look at this car, for example, this GT 500, this supercharged monster, these cars were absolutely incredible. And I think this was a real sweet spot in the modern era. Other things, in addition to the 1960s styling that I think played a big part in the appeal of this car, was also the fact that the 5.0 liter returned, but not in its prior form. This was not the 302 of old. This was actually an evolution of the modular engine using some high-tech technology with camshafts, etc., variable cam timing, and all these things. They started getting high performance numbers out of this new 5.0. The 5.0 brand was back, and that was huge. And I do think that was a bit of a boon for Mustang enthusiasts, those who remember the good old days, right, of the 1980s with that 5.0. That 5.0, people don't realize, was kind of a badge of honor. That 5.0 was a performance icon, okay? And to bring that back, including the logos that they used, the way it was marketed, it was brilliant. It was a brilliant move by Ford. They could have gone with any displacement they wanted, couldn't they? They could have gone with any displacement they wanted. Ford brought back the 5.0 liter. Really smart move. Not only from a performance standpoint, and they built a hell of an engine in the Coyote, and it's still in production today and has continued to evolve and get better and better and better, but also the fact that they went with that 5.0 liter displacement, okay, and they were able to capture and reharness that branding. That's a bit of a throwback. Absolutely incredible, and did great things for this car. Guys, let's keep going. We're having so much fun tonight. Let's take a look at the sixth generation Mustang. So, this sixth generation Mustang, a couple of super important things about this car. One, by this time, the Coyotes, this previous generation, now we're at the seventh generation, but these sixth generation Mustangs, right out of the box, I mean, these cars are 450, 460 horsepower. I mean, the amount of performance you're getting out of a base GT in a sixth generation, what's known as the S550, 2015 through 2023, heck of a run. And these cars are just incredibly high performance and, a lot of amenities. They're good cars to drive. The automatics have evolved. The automatics, I claim, have gotten better. Say what you will about Ford automatic transmissions. Still available, obviously, as manual transmission cars. These are great cars that can be used as dailies. A couple other things. Looking here at a GT 500, Ford went all in on just some incredible special editions, high performance editions. This supercharged GT 500, 800 horsepower, whatever it is, just absolutely ridiculous. You can't get the GT 500. You couldn't get the GT 500 in a manual, but you could get it in that, I believe it's a 10-speed dual clutch. These cars are just incredible in every way. The other car to consider, and if we're going to talk about the sixth generation, we also have to consider this guy, don't we? Let's take a look at this together, guys. Guys, what are we looking at here? This is the GT350 from the sixth generation of the Ford Mustang. I think this is a heritage edition, but these cars just absolutely incredible. Track oriented. This is a track car that you can drive on the street. These cars are only available in manual. Just the performance, the handling, the way it sounds with that flat plane crank. These cars just have a huge following. I mean, again, it's that evolution of the technology and with some retro styling, the GT350 nameplate harkening back to the original first-gen Mustangs. There's some brilliance in there from an engineering. There's some brilliance in there from a marketing standpoint. And Ford got it right with this car. Now, say what you will, there have been some issues with the engines, particularly in the early ones, beyond the scope of this podcast to really get into it. But the GT350 is well loved by those who want that more extreme track experience, track-oriented extreme experience. Whereas, if you want something that you can daily, 6th generation GT still give you a heck of a lot of high performance, and it's, dare I say, not as extreme out of the box, and it's a car that you can live with every day. But that 6th generation Mustang, just absolutely incredible in every way. Guys, we're getting up to the modern era. So what do we currently have from Ford with the Mustang? Let's take a look at it. So here we are. We're looking at a 7th generation Ford Mustang. Here we are in 2024, guys. We need to rejoice. We need to be grateful. Ford is still going strong. 60 years of the Ford Mustang. Absolutely incredible. And it's something that we should all rejoice in as automotive enthusiasts, that Ford is the survivor. The Mustang is the survivor. Camaro, gone. Challenger, gone. Corvette's still here. But in terms of surviving pony cars, that pony car, what are we talking about? Long in the nose, long hood, short deck, high performance, fun to drive. That's still available. Ford still going strong with the Mustang. You can go to the lot today and buy one of these, brand new. 30 to 50K will get you a lot of Mustang, either used or new. Okay. Looking at a dark horse here, one of the new special editions. There'll be more. This car, that evolution of the Coyote, that they're getting somewhere on the order of 500 horsepower out of these. I think the dark horse has a lot going for it. A lot of folks feel it's kind of not special enough for what you pay above the GT. Let me know what you think about the dark horse. If you were buying a Mustang today, would you go with the dark horse or the GT? Leave me comments. I think the dark horse is really cool. Now, when I compare it to a GT350 or I compare it to, a GT500, I think those cars are just kind of next level. I'm not a big fan of the 6th generation Mach 1, but I do think there's a lot of merit and uniqueness to having this new trim package. It's kind of got its own vibe. Dark horse is cool, but listen, the 7th generation GT, that evolution of the Coyote, all the performance you're getting, you either love the styling or you don't. Let me know what you think overall about the aesthetics and the styling of the 7th generation Mustang. You also got that EcoBoost. You got that 4-cylinder EcoBoost. Car's putting out over 300 horsepower. If we go back to 3rd generation Fox body era, yeah, those cars were not 300 horsepower out of the factory. And, if you could get with bolt-ons, your typical automotive enthusiast who had a 3rd gen back in the day or a 1st gen Mustang, your target was to get to 300 horsepower. Now forget it. 6th gen or even 7th generation Mustangs out of the factory, you get that solid performance out of a 4-cylinder. Now as an automotive enthusiast, I'm of the mind I want the V8. I want that sound, okay? That still means a lot to me. If I was buying a Mustang today, I'd have to go with the V8, right? Let me know what you think. I know EcoBoost does have a following. That's a whole other thing. But listen, it's just something to be really grateful and excited about as an automotive enthusiast, even if you're not a Ford guy, even if you're not a Mustang guy. Don't hate on them. Be grateful that Ford is still carrying the torch for us, for automotive enthusiasts. If you want to go out and buy a high-performance pony car today, you can. Brand new, off the lot. You can spec one and order one. You can get a GT, get a dark horse. We'll see what additional special editions they've got coming. There's the Mustang GTD. We'll see what happens when those, whose hands they're going to hit. Who's going to be lucky enough to get one. That's a big money car, though. That's the only issue with that. We'll see what other special editions they come out with. But super exciting times, I claim, to be a car guy, to be an automotive enthusiast. Guys, we can complain about the era of the EV. We can complain about some of these brands and these badges that have vaporized over the past few years. And it's sad. It's sad to see Camaro go away. It's sad to see the Challengers and the Chargers go away. But, we've got incredible cars like the Ford Mustang. Tonight, we're celebrating the Ford Mustang. The Ford Mustang, this is America's performance coupe. This is America's pony car, and I'm not going to say, America's sports car, you could debate. It would be an interesting debate. Tell me what you think in the comments. You talk about the Corvette as America's sports car, and you could talk about the Mustang as America's sports car. I claim they're different. Mustang kind of bridges gaps. Mustang is a pony car, which is that lightweight car, fun car, short rear deck, long hood, okay? And is it a sports car? I think it's more sports car than muscle car, but some of the variants of the Mustang, I think you could categorize as muscle cars. Pony car at its heart, whereas the Corvette, I think, is a sports car, and in my opinion, is more of the way that I associate and define a sports car. But let me know what you think in the comments. Mustang checks a lot of boxes, and I claim is absolutely, and I'll say it again, Ford Mustang has been and is the backbone of the automotive enthusiast hobby across the decades and era. It's also the winner. Ford Mustang, whether you're a Ford guy or not, sorry Chevy guys, sorry Dodge guys, and everybody else. Listen, the Ford Mustang has had that continuous production run, 1964 to 2024. Are you kidding me? And it's still going strong. It's still here. So Mustang wins. And I grew up as more of a Chevy guy. I've had several Mustangs. I've had several Chevys, Camaros, and Corvettes. I've had Challengers and that stuff as well. But I got to be honest, the Ford Mustang wins. It's still here. It's out-evolved the others. And thank you, Ford, for continuing to manufacture it. I think even if you're not a huge fan of Ford, even if you're not a Mustang guy and you a diehard Porsche guy, or you a diehard BMW guy or Camaro guy, whatever, leave me comments if you feel differently. But I do think we have to all rejoice and be grateful that there's still a manufacturer in Ford who's willing to produce a pony car with a rumbling V8 option, as well as a 4-cylinder EcoBoost option. We're not going to talk about the Mach-E tonight. I got a whole other episode on that. Check it out on my other videos. Please do. But guys, what do you think? I claim 60 years of the Ford Mustang, absolutely incredible. It is one of the great stories over the decades in the automotive industry, one of innovation. Not everything was perfect, and not everything has stood up well over the over the decades. We talk about the Mustang 2 and some of these. Listen, of course, some of these things don't show well in 2024 in the modern era, but still, if you look at the history of the Mustang, how it's evolved, absolutely incredible. And they're fantastic cars, whether you're a Ford guy or not. Go drive a modern Ford Mustang and see if it doesn't put a smile on your face. I don't care if you're a BMW person, you're a Porsche person, you're a Chevy person. I don't care. Your buddy CJ tonight says go drive a Ford Mustang GT, okay, and see if it doesn't put a smile on your face. I claim it will. Go drive a GT 500 and see if it doesn't just blow your mind. Mind equals blown. 700, 800 horsepower? You kidding me? And there's still a lot of great options out there, guys. We can sit here and complain about the EV era, or we can enjoy the hobby today for what it is. And we can be grateful that the Ford Mustang still going strong in 2024 and beyond. The Ford Mustang lives on. Guys, those are just a few of my thoughts on the history of the Ford Mustang. Let me know what you think. Hot Seat Automotive Podcast. Your buddy CJ loves you guys. Please give me a like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. I'll respond to all the comments I can. You guys know that. Leave me those comments. And guys, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.